All right, greetings, everyone. Welcome to another amazing episode of Beyond Boardroom Business. I'm serious. Make sure you bring your friends, your family, hit like and share this information because time is of the essence and we need the information that is about to be exposed tonight. I'm your host, Coach Stephanie, and tonight's interview is just going to be mind blowing. I have the honor of introducing to you all, if you aren't familiar with her, the ambassador, Davisha L. Johnson. And she's an amazing person. Without further ado, let me go ahead and bring her on so she can explain who she is and how powerful she is. Welcome. How are you tonight?
Good evening from Ghana. I'm fine. How are you?
Oh, I am amazing. Thank you. Thank you for being here. And how is it going over in Ghana right now?
It's wonderful. Thank you for having me. It's very on edge because people are unsure from a lot of different things, but I'm excited to be here with you this
Yes.
evening. I appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation.
Yes, Ambassador. So please tell us, who is Ambassador Davisha L. Johnson?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity, Coach Stephanie. My name is Ambassador Davisha L. Johnson. In 2023, the Secretary of State of Georgia awarded me with the Outstanding Georgia Citizen Award, which makes me a Goodwill Ambassador for the state of Georgia. I started the African Diaspora Collective in 2022 when I was invited to Ethiopia for a meeting to talk about the diaspora with a number of Pan-African organizations from around the world on the 10-year anniversary of the African Union creating the African diaspora per the amendment of their own constitution. So the African Diaspora Collective is a nonprofit organization. We were established in the great state of Georgia, which is where I spent most of my adult life. And then we focus on connecting Black people around the world. So wherever we are, if you are of African descent, that's where we specialize. We try and focus on 3 subject matter areas per ambassador. So I'm just one person, but there are 8 of us total. So I represent Africa, which is how I find myself here in Ghana, in West Africa, and we have ambassadors in the Middle East and Asia and all other kinds of places, but we all collectively work for one major goal, and that's connect Black people.
Wow, that is amazing. And thank you for stepping up and standing in your power and, listening, tapping into your inner self and just being so powerful. So how did you get started? What brought you to where you are now?
Well, it's a very haphazard story, but I'll give you the shortened version. I wanted to be an architect, actually, from the time I was a little girl. In Houston is where I'm originally from, Houston, Texas. I lived there until I was 9, and then my mother moved us out of the country to Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, where
Wow.
there was 0 Black people, but my family members, and I think there was like 2 people in the neighborhood. So the Black people, meaning African Americans. There were, however, a lot of Africans and a lot of Caribbean people. So those people are usually nationalists. So when you ask them about themselves, they'll say, "Oh, I'm Jamaican," or "I'm Sudanese," or "I'm something else." But there weren't any African Americans. So I didn't really get into the African American culture, I guess, per se, and understand the history behind it until I moved to Atlanta to finish high school in 1998. So I caught the last half of, or the last couple of years of the last century in Atlanta, which was, I guess, the pinnacle of the 1999 to 2000, as we say. And so I wanted to be an architect, but life lifed at that point. And so I went from 6 years in architecture, starting at Morrisburg college in a youth center. I spent 2 years there. Then went to a PWI, and that is now Kennesaw State. It was called Southern Polytechnic State University. I studied architecture there for 4 years, left that school, went to University of Houston. So I kind of did a full circle back to Houston and went to University of Houston for 4 years, studied construction management. Now that has absolutely nothing to do with politics, but that's, you know, we tend to go where the spirit leads us in this type of movement. So it was important for me to have 10 years in architecture and construction for the creativity of taking a blank piece of paper and creating something. So I'm a creative at the end of the day. And that kind of drove me haphazardly also into politics. I got a traffic ticket one day, and I watched a lot of Law and Order and Criminal Minds and Scandal, and all of those detective shows are my favorite. So I went to traffic court as if I was an attorney, and I had prepped the night before and had questions for the officer, and I was not going to pay the $75 ticket. It was just not happening. So I went to the courtroom, and the Black woman judge was so impressed with the fact that I had an argument for this traffic ticket, she suggested that I go to study law at Georgia State University. So I applied to go to law school for my political science degree. They let me into Georgia State University for political science. It's a block away from the state capitol. And at the time, I had 4 children. I had just had twins, and I needed a job. I needed a MARTA card. I needed some help. So the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus was hiring interns. They gave a free MARTA card and $600. So that's how I ended up in politics. And I spent 2.5 years as an intern, and then a legislative aide, and then I became chief of staff, and then I spent 4 years in that office, going around the country, meeting Black politicians everywhere. So a lot of them are friends now. And then I started my own political consulting firm when I graduated in 2016 in politics. I ended up running 32 different campaigns across the country. I ended up working for Senator Bernie Sanders for when he ran for president in 2018. And then I met a young lady that owned a chamber of commerce and asked me to come to Ghana in 2019. I had no idea there was a year of return. Wasn't even thinking about year of return. I was totally, focused on politics. But I did have a very specific niche in politics, which was Africans or people of minority groups, the campaigns that I ran. So I was already in the African community, and a lot of those people are business owners. So my previous dealings with trying to make money and going to school and having all these children was I'm very good at paperwork. So I was helping people start their businesses, start their NGOs, building websites. I did that for about 10, 15 years before I actually created a business out of it. I was just doing it, honestly, just as Black folks do. And then when I got into college, I realized, okay, I need to start formalizing these things. So at that point, when I got into college and then graduated and then started my own company, I realized the importance of administrators and administrative paperwork. And so I got into government contracting. And then I got into government contracting from the agriculture and construction side because there was a lot of infrastructure projects going on. So that got me to that skill set, and the political understanding of politics got me, with a great understanding of government contracting, because I understand what the end goal is for most of these contracts. And then the protocols behind getting those things done is how I ended up coming up with the idea to form the African Diaspora Collective in Ethiopia, based on all of those experiences and all those different degrees that I've had. They kind of all just melded together at the right time when I think the diaspora really needed a particular type of organization that I had not seen on the continent. There's a lot of them still in America, but a lot of us don't move and live here on the continent and form these things. We usually are very individualistic, or we attach ourselves to a village or a project or a place, and that's where we do our work. So So there's a lot of us here doing individual things, and we need to do it as a collective. So that's where the African Diaspora Collective came from, in the shortest version I can tell you about.
Wow, the shortest version. Wow. I mean, you just had an amazing story. Did you have any mentors while you were growing up?
Growing up, no, I didn't really have any mentors. I was kind of always the rebel. I think there's a lot of us. I've met a lot of people with a very, very similar story. We did, especially African American women that, as you say, are powerful and like doing impactful things. We usually are the black sheep of the family. We usually don't have a very good relationship with our mothers. We usually are most of the time the rebel and going off doing whatever it is that we want. We usually can't be told what to do. We usually are single until we get into our older age because we're so focused on what we need to do. And so we tend to not focus as much on our personal needs, which is most of the time to our detriment for our health and also for our spirituality and also for our mental health. So getting older now, I'm kind of recognizing those things because people are asking me now to be their mentor. So
Well, we are working with her in Africa, so please be patient with her because she has so much to share with us. Okay, please continue with what you were saying.
Sure. Sorry about that. We're in West Africa, so sometimes the internet is not the best. But you asked me about mentorship, and I didn't really have any mentors, like I said, growing up because of the state of flux of us moving to a different country. But I did get mentors when I got into politics. So I think people become mentors and don't know that they're mentoring someone from just being themselves and people watching them and learning from what it is that they do. So my first mentor is Judge Angela Brown, that same judge that told me I should go to law school in that courtroom ended up being my first client. When I was still in school, I saw that same judge right before I went to take my LSAT exam to go to law school. I saw her at the state capitol when I was interning. She said she was running for office. She asked me if I wanted to help her. I told her, I'm indebted to you at this point. You've changed my whole career path from being an architect to now being in politics and wanting to be an attorney. So I helped her run her campaign, just me and her, in the largest Black county in the state of Georgia. And she lost by like 3,000 votes or something. It was like over 100,000 people voted. So it really motivated me to really understand that I could be good at this. And then I got another mentor, Dr. Taylor. She was the first person to hire me as an intern for the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus. She and I started out kind of rocky, honestly. But she ended up being one of my best supporters and one of my biggest mentors in the transition to Africa, because she had been working here on the continent for 20 years before I even thought about it. And then Representative Sandra G. Scott, I call her my political mama. That's the person that I ended up working for when hired by D-Doc and Taylor. I ended up working for Representative Sandra G. Scott, and she and I, were on the phone last week. So she continues to support me and be my mentor, I think, forever. My mom passed away in 2023. D-Doc and Taylor and Scott were both at her funeral. So, you build familial relationships with people that turn into being your family, but also being your mentor at the same time. And then I became a mentor to two young ladies as well that just flat out asked me, will you be my mentor? I was like, sure, I guess. I don't really know how that goes. Just, do what I did and saw somebody that was doing something I wanted to do. And I was like, let me learn from them, ask a bunch of questions, see if they're opening to giving me information and teaching me, and then seeing that I'm trying to do what they're doing. Will they guide me or will they block me? That's what makes it making a mentor, and then, paying attention.
Yes, yes. Wow, that was powerful. Wow. It takes a village. It really does. So, can you tell me more about the global compact and what's going on with that?
Yes. So I guess that's a good question. It is a good question, but it's a good question in transition to what we just talked about in regards to mentorship. So as I elevated in my career, I also started meeting other women in these very high level spaces, first ladies of African countries, CEOs of multinational organizations, a lot of high level women. So I started thinking about, what does that look like in regards to the elevation in my own career. So in this last year or so, I find myself in different African countries, having different events, developing different programs. I had 17 different countries in my agriculture program last year that we trained people in. So how does that come together? Like, how do we talk about Black unity in our neighborhoods, like even on our block, and the next door neighbor compared to the lady down the street, compared to our cousins in Chicago, compared to our ancestors in Africa, compared to our distant relatives, as me and my co-host of our podcast used to call ourselves, in the Caribbean and in South America. So globally, the world became open to me. Like, my eyes became open to the possibilities of doing global business when I came to Africa. So that transformed itself into this global compact because I got involved in the United Nations. So I want to give a quick shout out to the United Nations and the Commission on the Status of Women. This month is Women's Month. So the Commission on the Status of Women is still going on. If this is still going to be going on, and people are still watching this during the month of March, you should tune in to the UN web TV. All of it's free, and it's just a bunch of powerful women talking about the things that they've done, but also the opportunities there are globally. So the Global Compact is bringing that all together. It's bringing together all of my experience in all of these industries. It's asking politicians to do something, to be impactful themselves. A lot of conferences, I've gone to a lot of webinars, I've gone to a lot of workshops, I've gone to a lot of private meetings, I've heard a lot of conversations, I've heard a lot of big ideas. I mean, there's a lot of talk, but very few will take action, or more than that, people just sometimes don't know where to start. And people just sometimes don't know how to go about it. And politicians are people, is what I think, the general public doesn't realize. They're not robots, they're not superhumans. They have families, they have children, they want to, be in nice houses and nice cars and eat well like everybody. But there's so much weight on them. The Global Compact kind of lifts off some of that. And because I was in politics for so long, I understand what it is to help build a politician and help build programming and be the person in the office that gets down into the work and helps these politicians be able to be the most efficient and the most impactful in their job as a public servant. So that's what the Global Compact is. It's creating opportunity for these Black politicians to be able to connect themselves without the bureaucracy of the federal government, without all of the barriers that were created by colonization, through all of the trauma of the slave trade and what African Americans versus Caribbean Americans versus Latin Americans have to go through when it comes to building economies. What does that look like? How can we make it simple? And that's what the Global Compact is. It's 15 years. We have 15 years to get ourselves together. We have until 24. So every year we will focus on a different theme. This year's agriculture, because that's the roots of Black people, is agriculture. That's why they took us from Africa, and some of us, I should say, from Africa, and brought us to the Americas and the Caribbeans, was to build their countries, was to build the infrastructure, because that's what we know how to do. And all of that started with food and the farm. So we're starting with food and farm. than year one. So every year it builds on itself to create a global supply chain. So
Wow.
I go to all of my political friends that I've met throughout the years and said, hey, we want you to sign on board, just like the United Nations has a global compact. We at the
Mm-hmm.
African Diaspora have a global compact that says you agree as a Black elected official to spend the next 15 years, whether it's your term or your legacy's term, to
Yeah.
focus as a unit globally on these 15 issues that will help liberate us economically as Black people around the world. So that's what the
Wow.
global compact is. It's a
That is
commitment to elected leaders.
that is beautiful. Wow, that is so powerful. And thank you. Thank you for standing in your calling and just doing your part, it's just beautiful. So please tell us more about the African Union. What is that about?
Well, that's a hot topic as well, which is kind of the basis of where the Global Compact started. And during my story, I told you how I went to Ethiopia and we did a bunch of Pan-African groups got together and discussed the African Union's 10-year anniversary of creating the diaspora. So something else significant just happened yesterday as well. On the 15th of March, the African Union got together as the ECOSOC, which is for civil society. So it's basically like the UN ECOSOC as well. It's the Economic, Cultural, and Social Council of either the AU or the UN, but the AU in particular, yesterday had a meeting for the diaspora and how they are going to legally put together a framework so that we as a diaspora, those of African descent, can engage officially with the
Nice.
African Union. So we, as an organization in 2022, framed the foundation of this organization around the African Union, the UN, the NAACP, the Organization of African Unity, and several other civil rights organizations. This is before ChatGPT, or I knew about ChatGPT, but we combined all of what we thought was the most impactful things that those organizations had done in history. And we combined the structure of the African Union ECOSOC and the UN ECOSOC, knowing that we were going to apply for ECOSOC status when we got the requirements fulfilled. And it just so happens this particular year, theme for the AU is reparations. So in 2023, they came to Ghana and had a reparations conference. The African Union sponsored it. A lot of our members of our organization went in person here in Ghana. There were a lot of mixed emotions. African Americans were not respected in the way that we felt we should have been in that meeting, based on the fact you're talking about reparations and the slave trade in a conversation that doesn't include the major piece of what that slave trade was about, or what that era of commerce and destruction was about for the colonizer, was us as a people. It was more about, which was also educational for me, but it was more about the fact that colonization for the African and colonization for the Caribbean and those in Latin America is still occurring right now in the same way that it was occurring then. African Americans don't realize that we have a bigger struggle currently, but we also are not still physically actually colonized under the rule of the British, like some of these Caribbean countries are currently in 2025. So I think that was the biggest takeaway from understanding what reparations looks like in regards to the AU. So we decided to immerse ourselves in the UN first and figure out the hierarchy of what that ECOSOC status looks like, how it functions. So we were blessed enough recently to be able to be appointed as advocacy chair for a UN regional caucus. That regional caucus is specifically for women and girls of the descendants of enslaved Africans of the Americas and the Caribbean. Wow. Just those women and girls, because we have our own story also. It's not the same as the Arab slave trade. It's not the same. It's also not the same as diaspora that have on their own volition moved outside of Africa or got a visa lottery ticket to go outside of Africa or as a refugee outside of Africa. Each of those specific demographics has a different experience, and the UN has recognized that. So they created in 2022 the Women and Girl Descendants of Enslaved Africans, Americas and the Caribbean's Regional Caucus. I was just appointed advocacy chair for this year. So we have, made a foundation, I think a strong one, strong allies, elders from the civil rights movement, women from the faith community have founded this regional caucus, have led us to kind of beginning to close that loop I was talking about as part of that global compact. So it's not just politicians, it's intergovernmental organizations, it's politicians, it's community activists specifically, it's community organizers, it's civil society. We were just part of the G20. I didn't know the G20 had a civil society component. We were in 3 working groups this year with the G20 in Brazil. So now the AU also has that same opportunity. So we want to be able to connect Black people in all aspects of not just tourism and coming back home to the continent for a connection to our roots, but tangible assets, tangibles that we can walk away with from either education to business to agriculture to health, all of the things that we know we're lacking in the Americas and in the West, we can get from Africa. So I know Black folks like me shown
let's just give her another moment or two, because this is so powerful. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm glad you're back. So please continue.
Yes, thank you very much. So I was talking about reparations and how all of our perspectives are basically different, and I didn't understand those differences until I moved to Africa and understood the importance of building infrastructure, which is what I have now phrased a new form of reparations. So a lot of the African American conversation around reparations is getting a check or getting free college or getting some type of tax incentives or all these
Oh, wow.
different types of things that are part of what could be about. So what I'm about is having an opportunity to, sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, can you still hear me? Okay, I'm still here.
Yes.
Okay, I'm still here. See, when you start talking about reparations, start happening, people start glitching out, internet. Don't take those things for granted. That's all I'm going to say about that. So the reparations conversation I want to have is how can we utilize their tools against them? Them being the institutions that built colonization and slavery. So those are systematic racism. Those are colorism and sexism and all of these political ideologies that keep us divided as a community. And I'm not talking about Africans versus African Americans. I just mean African Americans, just ourselves, from New York versus Atlanta people. Let's get our own houses in order before we start commingling ourselves with people that look like us. Because as we know, all skin folk are folk. So when we talk about reparations, each of us has a different form of reparations that we're talking about. In the Caribbean, they have a 10-point plan. Their reparations includes something that I don't think we would even say, which has something to do with, I'm paraphrasing, but making sure that colonization does not continue. Like once they stop it, they don't want it to continue because it's currently continuing as of 2025. So to African Americans, like that's not even on our radar because we don't see ourselves as being colonized because we have the US government, that we have Black politicians we have, somewhat perceived level of control. So each of us has a different way of what reparations look like. I think reparations should also include, if you want to go back to Africa, we should get a check. Just like they gave other races opportunity to move back to the continent, there are countries here that will receive us. Ghana has been one of those countries. I was able to get 10 members of our Chamber of Commerce citizenship last November, of which I myself received citizenship here as well from the relationships I've been able to build in this country. There are other countries that have. Sierra Leone had a citizenship ceremony. I believe the Gambia citizenship ceremony. I believe Burkina Faso is getting ready to have a citizenship ceremony. So a lot of these African countries, for whatever motives, I'm just going to point that out, for whatever motives there may be, to why there is interest at this level in those of us from the transatlantic slave trade, which we have dubbed here in Ghana the HUG diaspora, which stands for HUG, which stands for the historically unique group of descendants of the transatlantic slave trade. If you are not descendants of a person that has gone through the transatlantic slave trade, I'm not talking to you. You are a different Black folk group. That doesn't take anything away from you. That doesn't take away the reparations conversation from you. Just know that we have a list also that is specifically for us as a community, because I do not know any other community.
Oh, wow.
Out of Black Americans specifically that have physically ended during the Emancipation Proclamation, but it also continued in our mind in a different way than it continued in Africa. So we have a voice in the reparations conversation that's much different than these other voices, but all of us as a collective voice need to understand that and not try to make other people's voices be our voices or change spaces in order to be all encompassing. We don't have to change and assimilate into each other as much as we think we do. We need to be talking about our differences more and why that's so powerful. We're so powerful because we are different. And when you put us all together, there's nothing more powerful because we take up space everywhere. And that's the reparations conversation we need to have. We need to hit them from every angle possible in every part of the world, from everything that they have ever even thought about taking from us. We need to be tapping into to get back. And that's the reparations conversation that we need to have, is more about our different things that we need and not all pushing for this one thing. But these people in these 54 African countries, each country deserves a different reparations conversation. And not even the entire country. Each country had particular artifacts taken from them that are important to those tribes in those areas. So that makes that a different reparations conversation. And that's what we need to talk about as community. And I'm glad, you asked me about that. It kind of triggered me, as you can see, from what we talk about, because we need tangibles at this point. I've been around politicians for a very long time, and a lot of the general public just doesn't know. A lot of these people are really wanting to make impact, but the bureaucracy and the diplomacy and all of these things that are necessary that people don't see, the unsexy parts and the late nights and the worrying about somebody that's not even related to you, but that's your constituent, and somebody broke into their house and they called you, even though you're, the Secretary of Agriculture, they still knew your grandmother or something. So there's still a human connection that we have to understand politicians have. And that's what we need to tap into as Black people, outside of the emotions around politics. We need to be logical. And reparations is a logical conversation that we need to have with these white folks, honestly, and say, look, we understand that you say you weren't the ones, but at the end of the day, we weren't the ones either, but we still have to deal with it. So you still have to deal with it, which means you're going to have to go to the bank, sir. And then you're
All right, let's continue.
Okay, so reparations, as you can see, I'm very passionate about. And it's only because, like I said, I grew up in Canada, so I didn't learn about Malcolm X or Martin Luther King or the Civil Rights Movement. My mother was born in the 50s, but she also spent a large part of her life in Canada as well. My grandmother, my cousins, everyone lived in Canada. So we don't get a lot of, Black History Month education in the Canadian school system in Winnipeg. So I come at this from a different perspective. So my eyes are wide open. I'm very open-minded about listening also to other people's perspectives. And living on a continent, you have no choice but to develop a different level of patience and understanding of other people's cultures, even though they look like you. Right. You might think they think like you and they understand, but they do not. There is so much misinformation on both sides, and a lot of people just don't want to hear the information, the accurate information. It's ingrained in their minds, and you can't tell them any different on both sides. So right. Navigating that space in a reparations conversation takes a certain level of experience being an African American or an Afro-Latina or Afro-Caribbean. Because if you're not one of those people, you can't possibly understand. And it's the same thing as being a born African. If you weren't born in Ghana, you can't understand. That's what we need to understand as a people. I've lived here 5 years. I don't speak fluently the local language. I raised my children here now. They've been here 2 or 3 years. They are learning to speak the local language. So they will have grown up here the same way I grew up in Canada in another country as well. So my generations now, my legacy is moving to other countries, being in other spaces, and being able to understand other kinds of Black people. So when I'm 80 or my daughter's 80 and my great-great-grandchildren are talking about the 21st century in the year, 2105 or something, that we won't even be around. I know that the things that we're doing right now, the conversations that we're having about reparations and the impact we're making here on the continent is an important piece of that.
Wow. Okay. Again, I understand it. There's a lot of technical difficulties, but how can people find you?
So you can go to our website, which is www.tad.
Okay, again, www.tadc.world. Okay, again, she's having technical difficulties. And again, the website is www.tadc.world. Please check her out. We just discussed the Global Compact. We just discussed African Union and reparations. And she has so much more to offer and share. And she's definitely coming back. And I want to thank you all for being a part of this episode on Beyond Boardroom Business with your host, Coach Stephanie. And I'm just so thankful that I am able to connect with people all around the world so we can come together, because it takes a village. And I always say each one reach 10. So until the next time, please stay prayerful, stay purposeful, and stay powerful. I want to say thank you all. I really appreciate you. And I look forward to seeing you all next week. Peace.